Tom Brady loved his farm. He loved the feel of the soil beneath his nails. He loved the smell of fresh-cut hay. Most of all, he loved the quiet solitude. His farm was his sanctuary, a small patch of peace in a chaotic world. The farm had been in his family for generations. Tom was proud to carry on the tradition. He knew every inch of the land, every dip and rise. He felt connected to the earth, to the cycle of seasons, to the legacy of his ancestors. But this year, something felt different. A strangeness hung in the air, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It started with a visit from a peculiar salesman. This salesman would change everything. The man arrived on a day like any other. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the distant hum of cicadas. The farm lay quiet save for the occasional cluck of a hen or the lowing of cattle. The sun beat down, baking the earth. It was a relentless heat, the kind that made the horizon shimmer and the ground crack underfoot. The fields, once lush and green, now lay parched and weary. Tom was out mending fences when he saw the stranger approach. He wiped the sweat from his brow, squinting against the glare. The figure moved with a purpose, each step deliberate and measured. The man was tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to gleam with an unnatural light. There was something unsettling about his presence, a shadow that seemed to follow him, even in the bright midday sun. The salesman offered Tom a deal. His voice was smooth, almost too smooth, like honey laced with something bitter. He spoke of prosperity, of fields bursting with life. Special seeds, he called them, seeds that promised to transform the barren land into a paradise of plenty. They glittered in the sunlight, tiny promises of a better future, guaranteed to yield a bountiful harvest. Tom was initially hesitant. He had heard tales of such promises before, whispers of magic and trickery. He had always used his family's seeds, passed down through generations. They were a legacy, a connection to the past and a promise to the future. But the salesman was persuasive, his voice smooth and hypnotic. He painted pictures with his words, visions of abundance and prosperity that were hard to resist. Tom, swayed by the promise of a larger harvest, finally agreed. The handshake felt cold, a shiver running down his spine as their hands met. He bought a sack of the stranger's seeds. The weight of the sack felt heavier than it should, as if it carried more than just seeds. His gut told him it was a mistake, a nagging doubt that gnawed at the edges of his mind, whispering of consequences unseen. He shook the feeling off as he looked out over his fields. The land stretched out before him, a canvas waiting for the brushstrokes of the future. His gut was rarely wrong, but hope, that fragile, flickering flame, had a way of blinding even the most cautious of hearts. Tom planted the seeds the next day. He tried to shake off the unease that clung to him. As he sowed, he noticed something strange. The seeds felt different, cold, and oddly smooth, like polished stones. The very next morning, Tom awoke to a sight that sent shivers down his spine. The fields were covered in thick, verdant crops. They had sprouted overnight, growing at an impossible speed. Their stalks were a sickly shade of green, almost luminescent in the morning light. Tom touched a leaf, surprised by its rough texture. It felt wrong, alien. An icy dread crept into his heart. This was not the work of nature. This was something else. As the days passed, the crops grew taller, casting long, eerie shadows across the farm. The air grew heavy, thick, with an unnatural silence. The once comforting sounds of nature were gone. No birds sang, no insects hummed. Only the rustling of the crops remained. But it was the whispers that truly terrified Tom. They started subtly, like the wind rustling the leaves. As the crops grew taller, so did the whispers. They were low, menacing voices, hissing, unintelligible words that seemed to seep into Tom's bones. Tom tried to convince himself it was just the wind playing tricks on him. But deep down, he knew the truth. His farm, his sanctuary, had been invaded by something sinister. One particularly dark and moonless night, Tom decided to take it upon himself to watch over the fields. The farm had been his family's for generations, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility to protect it. He grabbed his lantern, an old relic passed down from his grandfather, and his trusty hunting rifle, which had seen many seasons of use. Fear prickled his skin, a sensation he hadn't felt since he was a child. But the growing dread in his heart was something he couldn't ignore. He had heard the stories, the whispers of strange occurrences in the night. He patrolled the perimeter of the fields, his lantern casting dancing shadows that seemed to come alive in the darkness. Each step he took was cautious, his senses heightened by the eerie silence that enveloped the night. As he rounded a corner, his heart leaped into his throat. He stopped abruptly, his breath catching in his chest as he strained to see through the inky blackness. In the soft glow of the lantern, he saw them, footprints. They were unlike any he had ever seen before, and they sent a chill down his spine. Large, inhuman footprints pressed deep into the freshly tilled soil. They were too large to be from any animal he knew, and the shape was disturbingly unnatural. The footprints led to a clearing in the center of the field. Tom followed them, his heart pounding in his chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. There, in the middle of the clearing, etched into the earth, was a symbol. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, and yet it felt eerily familiar. It was a circle with strange angular markings around it. The lines were sharp and precise, as if carved with intent and purpose. Tom recognized it from his grandfather's stories. His grandfather had been a man of many tales, and this symbol was one he had described in hushed tones, warning of its dark significance, a symbol of ancient evil. It was said to be a mark of a presence that should not be disturbed, a harbinger of doom. Tom's mind raced as he tried to recall every detail his grandfather had shared, the warnings, the legends, and the fear that had always accompanied those stories. He stood there, gripping his rifle tightly, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The night seemed to close in around him, the silence growing heavier with each passing moment. Slowly he began to back away from the symbol, his instinct screaming at him to leave. The lantern light flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance with malevolent intent. He hurried back through the fields, his mind racing with thoughts of what he had seen. The symbol, the footprints, the stories, they all pointed to something far beyond his understanding. Reaching the safety of his farmhouse, he closed the door behind him, his heart still pounding. He knew that this night was just the beginning, and that the ancient evil his grandfather had warned about was very real. Tom spent the rest of the night poring over old books, trying to find any information that could help him understand what he had encountered. The ancient symbols, the stories, and the fear, they all seemed to converge on this one night. As dawn approached, Tom knew that he had to be prepared. The night watch was no longer just a duty, it was a battle against an ancient evil that had resurfaced, and he was determined to protect his family's legacy, no matter the cost. Tom's blood ran cold. He knew then that he was in over his head. This was not just a bad crop or a strange wind, this was something ancient, something powerful, and it was angry. He turned to leave, to run back to the safety of his farmhouse, but it was too late. A figure emerged from the field, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. It was tall and skeletal, with long, sharp claws and eyes that glowed with a malevolent light. Tom stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. He raised his rifle, his finger trembling on the trigger, but he hesitated. He had a feeling that even a gunshot wouldn't stop this creature. Tom, desperate for answers, went to the town library. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of old paper filled his nostrils as he stepped inside. The library, a relic of the past, held secrets that had been buried for generations. He found an old, dusty tome on local history. The book seemed to call out to him, its worn leather cover and faded lettering hinting at the knowledge it contained. As he flipped through the brittle pages, his blood ran cold. Each page revealed more about the dark past of his land, the inked words almost whispering their secrets to him. He found an entry about his land. The text described a place once fertile and prosperous, now shrouded in mystery and fear. It spoke of an ancient ritual, a sacrifice to appease a dark entity that resided in the earth. The ritual was meant to ensure the land's fertility and the community's prosperity. The ritual had been stopped generations ago, the entity angered. The community had paid the price for their defiance, the land turning barren and cursed. The land had been cursed, deemed uninhabitable. Tom's blood ran cold. He realized that the stories his grandparents told him were not just myths, but warnings. He realized the seeds were not the source of the evil. They were merely the key that had unlocked it. The true power lay beneath the soil, waiting to be unleashed. They were merely the key that had unlocked it. The ancient key, a symbol of the past, now held the fate of the future. He knew what he had to do. The weight of his ancestors' mistakes bore down on him, but he was determined to set things right. He had to finish the ritual. The ancient texts provided a guide, each step crucial to appeasing the entity and lifting the curse. He had to appease the entity. The dusk sky cast an eerie glow over the farmland, the perfect setting for the ritual that would decide the land's fate. He just hoped it wasn't too late. The weight of the task ahead filled him with anxiety, but he knew he had no choice. He raced back to the farm, fear lending speed to his steps. The wind howled around him as if urging him to hurry. The fate of the land, and perhaps his own, hung in the balance.